Hey, welcome to another episode of GeekOutdoors.com. So as a modern computer user, I think we are very fortunate because there's so much open source software available. And so today, I'm going to be going over my pros and cons of using open source software. Now, if you are not familiar with what open source means, that basically means these programs or software that you're using, the source code or the programming is open to the public and it's freely available for you to look at and modify. So that's a very general description of what open source means. So let's go ahead and start with the very first pro, and it's a big one, and that is most open source software is free. It didn't cost me a single penny to basically pay for any of these software that I'm actually using right now. Firefox is a very popular one. Another one I use is the LibreOffice suite, so I could do Microsoft Office related stuff without paying for Microsoft. The actual screen recording that I'm doing right now is through a tool called OBS. I also use other things like Simple Screen Recorder as well. And even my video editing, I use tools like Kdenlive, OpenShot. My audio editing is done through Audacity. And my operating system itself is Linux Mint, which is all free and open source. I didn't have to spend a single penny on any of them. So that is the biggest advantage right off the bat. And this is something that is not just, related to open source operating systems like Linux, but a lot of these programs are also available in other platforms like Windows and Apple Mac. So that I think is the biggest pro that I could think of right at the beginning. So the second pro is it's open source. As I just mentioned a little bit earlier, for people who know programming, they could actually look and see what this program is made of, the coding underneath. And so with that, they could understand how things work. They could make improvements, and they could even use a lot of what they learned to create their own programs. And so I think that is very valuable and powerful, which leads me to the last pro of open source software, and that is the community. It is community driven. And so a lot of these open source projects, they exist because of people who are voluntarily giving their time to actually create this. And it's not always free. There are people who actually get paid, especially for these much larger projects, these open source projects where they need more people. But the majority of people who use open source software is driven by a community of people all around the world. And I absolutely love that. And it really gives me a lot of confidence that a lot of the open source software that is being produced, most of the times it's being produced because out of passion, out of the need to serve the overall larger worldwide community as a whole. So that is in general. So those are the main three pros that I have. So let's go ahead and get to the three cons. The first con is the flip side of it, the first pro, which is it's free. So you might think, why is it being free a con? Well, it's a con because you need money. You need money to keep the software running. You need money to keep the servers running. And as I stated earlier, for the much bigger projects, they actually have people who are working on at these companies. And so that means they need money to actually continue to work there. Because even though I would like to say most people would do stuff for free, well, most people won't, because people need to take care of themselves and their family. And because of the fact that most of these programs are free, unless they're much bigger projects that are supported by much larger companies, which is the reality, then a lot of these projects don't stay there for a long time, and they're not able to make as many improvements quickly because it goes back to they need money to actually make that happen. And so that is the first and biggest con, which is the flip side of the first and biggest pro. It's free, and that's a good and a bad thing. And so the second biggest con with open source software is quality control. Now, I know people are going to have this argument that, you get broken updates with Microsoft Windows, Apple Mac, and that is true. No software, no project is completely perfect. But the difference between paid programs and open source programs, and when I talk about open source programs, I'm primarily talking about the ones that aren't the most well-funded and that aren't the most popular, okay, which is the majority of open source software. Most of the times, they're not going to have the same level of quality control and polish that a paid program has. And like I said, just because it's open source doesn't mean it's free. So normally for the projects that actually have more money, there is more quality control. And also with more proprietary or paid programs, because they have a responsibility to their clients, to their shareholders, it's a business. If they consistently release things that don't have higher quality control standards, they're not going to be in business much longer. Okay, whereas in the majority of the whole open source community, most of this is a volunteer stuff. And so people, if they decide that it's not working out for them, then they'll just stop working on the project or the community just dies. And so with that, then you don't have as much of the priority or mainly any disadvantages by not supporting it anymore. So that's really the main difference. And that leads to this whole quality control and polish that we see most of the times versus paid software. Mostly it's proprietary versus free and openly available software. So that is the second con. And so the final con with open source software is support. Now, I did mention earlier that there is a great community for a lot of these much larger open source projects. And because of that, you're normally going to get better support. But the thing is, since these are all mostly free and it's volunteer based, you're not going to get the same level of support the majority of times versus something like a proprietary solution or a paid solution like Microsoft Windows. Once again, it goes back to the business and the money aspect of it. They have the money, the funding to actually pay people to give support. Whereas in the open source communities and open source projects, it really depends. It's kind of a hit or miss. And, like I said earlier, if you have much larger projects that are well funded by businesses, you're normally going to be able to provide much better support than just, like your standard documentation or facts area. So that is the main 3 cons that I have, and also the 3 pros. Now, these are my own personal opinions. So if you actually had any thoughts of your own, or maybe you had your own pros and cons, be sure to leave that in the comments area below. But as you could probably already tell, I absolutely love open source software. I definitely want to support the community any way possible. Most of the times, I always highly recommend people, if they're able to, just donate money to these people who produce this amazing software for you. That'll keep everything running and make sure that you actually are able to get more of this great open source software that we have. So if you actually had any thoughts on this, be sure to leave down in the comments area below. And as always, if you did get value out of these videos, be sure to share, like, and subscribe. Hey geeks, if you are a creative geek like me and you wanted to learn how to create content on YouTube and other places on the internet, then check out my Go Content Creators group, where you'll get access to 30 videos plus additional content for all the creative geeks out there. And the best part of it is, all of this is free. Simply head over to the link below, check out my page, and sign up for my Go Content Creators group. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the other side. Thanks for checking out this episode. And as always, if you like these videos, be sure to click on the subscribe button. And for full written content, audio content, and additional geek stuff, head over to geekoutdoors.com, and I'll see you outdoors on the very next episode.